says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Gillard!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Join me to break down all of the action out of round 8 live from the post games. My good mate, Sixties. Eels going down 26 to the Broncos, 26 to the Broncos, 16 for the Parramatta Eels, 60s. Before we get into it though, mate, quick shout out to our sponsors, star partners, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, as well as Big Swing Golf, Northmead. Big fella though, I'm frustrated. How are you feeling?
Mate, I'm angry with the world. I can list off that many things that I'm angry with. I'm angry with the way that our team started and played through the first half. There was some substandard performances that were there. But more than that, I'm angry that we are still playing games up in Darwin. I don't care. Look, we do some great stuff with the community, but I've been maintaining this for a number of years right now.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether or not we win the game, and we're starting to get into a pattern of losing the games up there. The game up there in those conditions takes a physical toll on the team, and it's time to end it. And if we need to start a petition to get it to end, then we need to do that, because it has its impact on the team, not just in the game, but we know they're going to feel it for the next couple of weeks. It's just ridiculous conditions to be playing in. You can see it even before the game started and they were dripping with sweat. It is just not conditions to be playing rugby league in. The fact that we're taking a home game up there, when in this game tonight, we could have been playing the Broncos at home. I'm really well and truly over that. But then to top it all off, just when I thought I couldn't be fired up about anything more, we then see that ridiculous lack of balls by the match officials.
Absolute cowards.
Let's just go to the you cannot be serious stinger,
yeah,
mate.
Well, you've brought the right sort of energy to start this review, mate. Let's get into it.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
But yeah, so we see the enforcement, or the don't call it a crackdown, on the hip drop tackle in full force in this game, well, at least for one team, where the Parramatta Eels had the early sin binning of young forward Jermaine Hopgood on what must be said, that is not a hip drop tackle. Right?
It's not a hip drop tackle. The bloke was as close to a conventional rugby league tackle as you are ever going to see.
You might as well outlaw contact below the hips if you're going to be putting that in the sin bin. Like, just keep it like AFL, below the shoulders, above the hips. That's it.
Yep. Now, then you had two classic hip drop tackles from the Broncos.
Ezra Mam somehow missed live on a half line break against Paul Matt Dury, a player of a history of injuries at the knees, and that was missed live and had to be called back by the bunker. So that's obviously an indictment on Klein there, but the bunker got that one right, thankfully. But then what followed was, like, it goes beyond an embarrassment for the Code 60s. It is actually a disgrace.
There are lots of things you can call into question here, and I just want to be careful about what I say, because we cannot call into the motivations or whatever behind a decision like that. But when you have a big forward like Payne Haas with a classic hip drop that causes damage to a player, where you saw the state that Regan Campbell Gillard was in.
A player who doesn't stay down, by the way.
Absolutely. So the action has actually injured a player and forced them off the field. It's as clear as day that it is a hip drop tackle. No action.
Haas knew he was a dead man walking as well. You could see from when he got up, he knew straight away that he was in huge trouble. And
he will be suspended.
Yeah, he's probably going to get 4 or 5 weeks for that. Like, yeah. if they're serious about this, don't call it a crackdown.
How long is Reg going to be out for now?
Probably 6 to 8 weeks. Like, if we're lucky.
Oh, mate, like that. That was one of the more disgraceful decisions or non-decisions that I think I've ever seen in a modern game of rugby league. There are no excuses for that, and we know Annesley's going to come out and he'll say, yes, that should have been a sin bin.
Or a send-off.
It means bugger all to us right now. Absolutely bugger all to us right now.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And this is one of those ones where we're not trying to deflect on what the Parramatta Eels failed to do in the first half, because we're going to talk about that.
We're going to be ripping. We're going to be ripping in as we started.
This is such a disgusting, where you call it an oversight. Like you said, you don't want to be insinuating that there is something systemic to it, because in a code as big as rugby league, you want to hope that everything's fair and balanced, or to some relative degree, given that there is human error involved. But Klein has been billed for the last 2 or 3 years as the game's best ref. If this is happening on his watch, and if this is happening with what's meant to be a unified bunker that applies the same logic to the entire round of action, which we know is a lie, because the only thing they're consistent about is being inconsistent. But if this is happening under the whistle and the eye of the game's best referee, what does that say for the code?
Look, let's just call it as it is. That decision there, at best, is pure incompetence, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just say at best it's pure
so
incompetence.
now the Eels are left. I mean, given that there were reports from Fox Sports on the sideline and 9-2 obviously, that Reg took well over, I think, 5 minutes to get up 6 stairs, 60s.
I think 2 minutes, but
2 minutes, whatever it was. Really, really concerning signs for Parramatta. Obviously, Reg, one of the real focal players for this team. Let's go through the stats very quickly. Let's make it quick, because I've got more stuff I've got to gripe about for both the Eels and outside of the Eels. But the Broncos prevailing in this one, 26-16. It was a sort of torrid affair that we tipped at the B60s pretty much, while the Broncos raced away to a pretty comprehensive lead in the first half on the back of poor errors from the Parramatta Eels and some absurd luck for the Broncos. They were able to capitalise. Herbie Farnworth scoring the opening try in the 14th minute. Adam Reynolds, Ezra Mam and Katoni Staggs tacking on that barrage of first half points. No tries in the second half for the Broncos, but a pair of penalty goals. Reynolds 2 from 4 for try conversions, 3 from 3 for penalty conversions. For the Eels, Quentin Gufferson leading the way for their first try. Mike Acevo out-jumping Selwyn Cobbo in the 58th minute, and then Sean Russell finishing off a nice little movement down the right edge in the 63rd. Mitch 2 from 3 off the tee. Sin bins for both teams, we already mentioned them, Jermaine Hopgood and Ezra Mam. Payne Haas should have been a bin or a send-off on that list too. But Broncos, on the way to that first half, where I think they had 60-plus points of possession, ended up finishing this game 54-46 in terms of possession, plus just under 4 minutes of time possession, completing way more effectively than the Parramatta Eels. That was apparent. 86% for the Broncos, only 68%, so a palindrome there for the Eels. That's really disappointing for the blue and gold. As you can imagine, the Broncos ahead in most key attacking stats, about 200 more run meters, about 40 more post-contact meters. So the Eels actually held their own in that regard, surprisingly. More line breaks for the blue and gold, 3-2, mind you, but the tackle break, 60s. That's a big one there. 48-26 for Brisbane. That forward pack really, in that first half, setting the tone for the Broncos. Eels, half a second slower on average speed to play the ball speed. What a shock. More offloads for the Eels. Both teams about the same, kick the fusel. Not a great night for both teams. They let the ball bounce a number of times. Defensively, both teams quite poor. Broncos at just over 85% effective tackle rate. The Eels at just under 84%. So both coaches going to be frustrated with their defense there. 26 missed tackles, 22 ineffective for the Brisbane Broncos, so a tick under 50 combined there. Eels, 48 missed, but 12 ineffective, so 60 flat in terms of poor tackles for the blue and gold. Negative plays, 60s. More errors for the Eels. That makes sense of those completion rates, 13-7. Both teams conceding just about the same amount of penalties, 4 for Parramatta, 3 for the Broncos. And then the 6 agains were 1 apiece. And ruck infringement for Brisbane at inside 10 for the Parramatta Eels.
Okay, so let's call it as it was in the first half, which was an atrocious first half from the Parramatta Eels. Yep. Absolutely atrocious. Yep. 0 line speed.
Middle forwards. I think Ryan Madison was good, but I think the other 3 middle forwards really need to have a look at themselves in that first stanza. Hodgson, Barlaw, and Reagan Campbell-Gillard, they got bullied. That's
let's have a look at you had 5 missed tackles from Reg out and 12 completed tackles in the match, 5 missed tackles. Hodgson, 16 completed tackles, 5 missed tackles. Junior, 12 completed tackles, 2 missed tackles. It's almost like they weren't involved in the game. And when you were just saying there about the dominance of the Brisbane forwards, in that first half. Let's be honest. That's because they didn't have anyone to run against.
Yeah, they weren't being challenged.
The Eels were so passive in the defensive line. They were just letting them run to them all night. And you're not going to win games of football if you're just sitting back on your heels and watching them come to you. Now, does this have something to do with the conditions that they're playing in? Yes, maybe. But and I'm going to get back to the Darwin game as it is. But that's not an excuse for how the Eels started that game.
No.
Because both teams are subjected to those conditions.
Although,
and I think we started to see the Broncos wilting.
They absolutely, even at the end of the second half, 60s, where we had a couple of sustained possessions, you saw their line speed just drop off dramatically. What I will say about those even conditions, though, is that the Eels came into this game on a 5-day turnaround, which is another disgrace for the NRL. Like we mentioned it in the podcast earlier this week, but in terms of the scheduling for this game, we cannot be taking games to Darwin on 5-day turnarounds. That is.
Well, look, let's just be blunt again with the call. It is our decision to take a game. It is our club's decision to take a game to Darwin, and it is a commercial success, and no doubt it's a community success. But we're in the business of football, and if we are going to give away competition points because our team has not turned up physically to that Darwin game in the last 2 years, if we're going to throw away home games, if we're going to throw away the best possible chance of getting competition points. Now, it's not saying that the Eels shouldn't be able to win in Darwin. What we're saying is it's making their job harder. Why are we going to make the job harder for our own football team by taking matches to the tropics? It is illogical. I don't care how commercially successful it is. I honestly don't care how commercially successful it is. Like, I'll give an extreme example of what might be commercially successful. It could be commercially successful to sell our best 2 players off every year to a transfer fee to England and get, say, $1 million to sell them off. Would it make football sense? Absolutely not. And it's a ridiculous suggestion. So I think it's just as ridiculous to be taking games to the tropics, make our job harder, make it physically draining on them so that they're going to be impacted for probably the next 2 weeks. It makes no sense whatsoever. It needs to end, and it needs to end now. And I don't care that we're losing some valuable commercial rights or just the coin from it all. And I'm sorry that it takes away some of the great community work that's done up there. But I'll repeat, we are in the business of football. We are in the business of winning football games. And the more football games you the more commercially successful you are going to be.
That's right. You'll create those numbers in the aggregate elsewhere, right? If you're winning premierships or going very close every year. So, and the problem is that this isn't going to be a one-off loss for the Parramatta Eels 60s. We now know that as far as 2 weeks up to Magic Round now, they're going to be feeling the impact of this trip to Darwin. So it puts the Eels at a significant disadvantage, not just for the round that they're playing in, but for a full fortnight afterwards. So, yeah, that's not a very good feeling, is it, coming out of this one, knowing that the full extent of the damage hasn't been realised between the Reagan Campbell-Gillard injury, which that, in terms of Darwin, obviously it's a non-factor because that could have happened at any ground, but that, coupled with the fact that the team are going to be bearing the fatigue load for another fortnight, is brutal.
Yeah, and let's just put this into perspective for anyone that's listening to this now and thinking we're having a whinge after a loss. We flagged this in our preview podcast. We've banged on about it for the last couple of years about this match up in Darwin. This is nothing new. Even if we had have made the great escape in the second half, I'd still be banging on about it now, because what the players are put through in this game is not advantageous for us in any way, shape, or form, and we need to be looking for ways of making the conditions that we play in advantageous for our team. That should be the mission statement of organising the season. look for whatever advantages you can supply for our football team. This is the complete opposite. And I'm sorry. It has to be said, and has to be said often.
Mhm. Agreed.
I am so over it, mate. I am so over it.
In a competition as fierce as the NRL, ceding that sort of home field advantage is just ridiculous, isn't it? So very, very frustrating. Let's get back to the game itself, mate, because there is plenty of the breakdown here. The Eels, this was a very complex game, as simple as it was at surface level too, where the Eels' poor play really, set the table for this defeat, regardless of that big second half comeback. But beneath that, there was some bad luck, some poor calls. Brisbane being opportunistic, Brisbane being lucky in terms of those, non-calls going against them. Let's start with where the Eels got it really wrong, because as a team and on an individual level, there is a lot to break down here. I'm going to start with, I don't like to pile onto players, but I'm going to start with one of the wingers, 60s, Sean Russell. Once or twice is coincidence. After that, it becomes a pattern. And when you're struggling under the high ball the way he is, and I don't know if Wonga Blake has cursed the poor man since he got dropped, but if you're struggling under the high ball as an outside back, then I don't think you'll be playing first grade.
Yeah. The only question remains, what's the option?
Well, Bailey Simonson's going to be a Cat 1 HIA failure, mandatory 11-day stand down. So he's out for the game against Newcastle on Friday. We can turn back to Hayes Dunster, the player that was just, shuffled back to the New South Wales Cup in order to get his game right and get some more match time under his belt as he builds back from that big knee injury. I don't know.
Well, how about we sign a player or two?
Yeah, well, that's if we're talking about you got to be kidding me sort of stuff, right? We've been talking about this X Factor player for months now, 60s. It's time.
We've got 27 players.
Well, 27 players, 30. Two of which one is Wonga Blake, who was just dropped and is now unavailable, and the other of which I always forget about Jeremiah Masia, who's was borderline 18th man, not playing New South Wales Cup. So we're playing for top 25 here, 60s, and we're meant to be serious about contending for the premiership.
Well, where's things going to stand next week? We're looking at it'll probably be a return to Sean Russell in the centres and Hayes Dunster on the wing,
yep.
Because that's basically the only players that are available. That's the only players that will be available. Now, I didn't have a problem with Bailey Simonson playing at centre. In fact, I thought he was having quite a good game until he was injured.
He actually was having a fair crack out there. He was working hard for the ruck, or in the ruck for the Parramatta Eels, and obviously had no real attacking opportunities given the torrent of possession that went Brisbane's way. But also defensively, he wasn't really an issue, was he?
No.
I don't think he was, at least from the initial pass on that game. Yeah, so we got problems in the backline, 60s. I think our problems in the forward pack are far more fixable, which is good news, but maybe not good news in that they're going to have to do it without Reg for a while. We say tentatively right now, waiting for the report. But in saying that, I think Junior has had a pretty ordinary start to this season now. I've been giving him some time. He's had 2 weeks off of that suspension. He just looks short of step right now. I don't know what's going on with the big fella, but with Reg out or presumably out, he's going to really need to step up and put his hand up to lead this forward pack.
Well, all we can say is from the perspective of naming a team for this week, the early thought is we're in all sorts. We're in absolute all sorts of trouble. And I know this is coming at it from an extremely negative perspective, but genuinely, we are going to have trouble naming a 17.
Yeah, well, we talk about between injuries and then players that their spot should be under a spotlight right now. Josh Hodgson's had struggles recently in defense. And he's replacing Brendan Hands, who's been very good for us. Had a really poor pass to Ryan Madison when the game was there for the Eels to maybe make a push to win it. So they've got problems at dummy half that need to be sorted out. They've got problems in the front row, problems in the back line. They've got problems in the halves. Dylan Brown is still out of sorts.
He is, and dare I say it, but if we've got a problem in the centres, you know where I'm going with this.
Well, I'm not ruling out
I'm not ruling out that Dylan goes there for a game or two. It's, it's not out of the realms of possibility. I don't think it will happen, nor am I calling it to happen. But I'm just saying we are in all sorts to be able to name a team. No doubt we're going to have to look. I wouldn't surprise if we have to apply for more exemptions.
For who?
Well, we might end up with Loomy playing in first grade at this rate, out on the backs.
That's a hard pass for me. I think you manufacture a more competent backline without Loomy at this point. So I don't know how we're going to do it, but yeah. So
I'm not necessarily advocating it, but what we're talking about is both Sean and Hayes have struggled in their return to first grade. Whether they're quite ready, whether they've got issues, whatever the case may be, right? Now, we know that Hayes is going to be another 12 months away from getting back to his best. That's just the way it is with, if you've just done an ACL, you're going to be a good 12 months working your way back to being anything like you were before. He didn't just do the ACL. He did a triple whammy. He's got rid of every ankle ligament in that one hip drop tackle. So he's just hasn't got the top pace that he used to have. And that's proving to be problematic for him. And now we're seeing that Sean has the yips under the high ball for whatever reason. And I don't think it's something that happened that he had an issue with before, because first of all, he's played plenty of fullback. So he's used to being under pressure with the high ball. But, the last 2 weeks have not been good from that regard. So, mate, I just don't know. Maybe my anger with the world has got me well and truly under the glass half full. Maybe I'm looking at the dregs in my mind at the moment.
The errors, the poor play selection, Sean Lane's second phase nightmare in this game, it all makes for a very frustrating fan experience. You're sitting there watching a very good Brisbane team, knowing that Parramatta are playing so far below what they're capable of. And then in the second half, the Eels rally just a little bit. They weren't even near their best still. And they absolutely started to, pressure Brisbane massively. So incredible.
Well, look at the meters that Parramatta started to make in completing sets in that second half.
And
right,
and one player that I actually want to shout out in that regard, and I'm surprised because I had him highlighted as a potential liability in these conditions, but one player that actually improved their playing stock, in my opinion, massively in this game was Wirra McGregor. He played tough. 105 metres off 10 carries, and they were hard-fought carries coming out off the red zone, alongside 15 tackles, 2 missed, 1 ineffective. So not a defensive juggernaut by any means, but he did his job in defence. So I thought Wirra was very good. I thought Matt Dury showed why he's valuable off the bench, coming in on that right edge, and he was really testing that Broncos left edge. He actually had a line break until Ezra Mam hip dropped him. And there was another couple of other really good runs there as well. So how many tackle breaks was he credited for? He's credited for 0 tackle breaks, which seems not right.
Basically what you can summarise how Dury plays is that each of his runs challenge the defence.
Yeah, which is what you love to see, being north-south first, not sideways initially, really asking those big questions. And that sort of play opens up the ability to be more expansive in other plays. So really liked what those couple of guys did off the bench there. Like I said earlier, I think Ryan Madison among those starting middles can hold his head up high. 13 carries, 118 metres. So some tough work there, but 42 tackles, 60s, which is comfortably the best on the team by some margin for just 3 missed, 1 ineffective. So he was actually strong defensively there. When the rest of the forward pack outside of Sean Lane had double-digit missed tackles, multiple missed tackles apiece, and they were all under 35 or less tackles. Matto's doing a pretty good job there defensively. But yeah, this is I'm just looking through my game notes here. More dubious calls. I thought that initial one-on-one strip on Bryce Cartwright, who I actually had as one of our better players in this game, 60s, capable, I think, affecting the strip. This goes back to that Canberra and Dragons game that was playing while we finished our game last Sunday. That was played before we finished our game. We're watching the replay as we got back. Was it being played? No, it was played before us. I'm getting my timelines mixed up. What constitutes a tackle? How long do these players get to hold a player up, set up the peel away, and go for the tackle when they're all clearly held? And that was the case where the camera didn't catch it initially. They went back on the replay, and I thought that Cartwright was well and truly held when that one-on-one strip was affected.
Yeah, the camera didn't catch it because I think they deemed that as the tackle.
Tackle completed, move on. Yep. I mean, another negative for the Eels. I don't know what Guffer was thinking challenging that play. That is never going to get overturned by the bunker, that 40-20 knock on.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm struggling with a 3-2-1 for us because, I've got some players that I'm happy with how they performed, but I wouldn't be comfortable giving a 3-2-1. And the reason for that is we normally look for, out of a win, for example, with a 3-2-1, you look for the players who we couldn't have won without. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, who made a really big difference? And I can see the positives in Wiremu Greg. He certainly brought plenty with his carries, 105 run meters, 37 post contact. And I mean, that's the stats, but the eye test tells you that he brought a lot of impact off the bench. You look at the workload that Ryan Madison was putting in, but it was still a case of our middles were missing in the first half, and he's part of that middle. And I just, and we're talking about two of the better performers there with that. Gutho, like, he made a brilliant try save, but then I look at the way they toyed with us with those kicks, and he just couldn't be there for the diffusals. And then you've got that tap back challenge, and you think, what's going on there? I mean, the bloke was competing all night, but I still find it hard to give a 3-2-1. And yet, this is where I'm conflicted, trying to work all of this out. It was a 10-point loss, and it was 4 tries to 3. And the Broncos had incredible luck with all bar one of their tries. Look, I mean, maybe you can say incredible luck, but there was also some skill involved in the kicks, of course.
One thing too that we didn't mention earlier, but the Eels have had a little bit of kick pressure this season, and they were actually punished for it today. The Broncos did their homework. Adam Reynolds twice shifting the ball when whether it was Bryce Cartwright or someone else came after him. The first time it resulted in the try for himself, where Ezra Mann broke through. And I don't know what Hodgson and Reagan Campbell-Gillard are thinking. Hodjo just makes a poor tackle attempt, and Reg played for the intercept 60s. I don't know why, but led to Reynolds scoring. And then the second time, Guffer made that big try saver at the last line. So, I mean, credit to the Broncos. Like, a couple of those kicks and those shifts on the fifth tackle were clearly a bit of homework done on the way the Parramatta Eels play the game. But also, you take away, the Sean Russell gift try, the Reagan Campbell-Gillard and the Josh Hodgson gift try, and that's 10, 12 points off the board, and suddenly the Eels are in front.
Yeah, I mean, the what ifs and the pointing and we can point the fingers at players, and
it sounds looking.
There's going to be a lot. There's going to be plenty of supporters that are going to do that.
Looking at some live feedback from the presser 60s, it looks like Brad's actually popping off here for the first time ever in terms of questioning what constitutes hip drops and like what the punishment mechanisms are. So I think he actually got cut short by someone off the side to stop him from losing his mind. So that's how bad it is when but Brad Arthur, someone that has never complained publicly, is actually tearing in.
Well, mate, I know how he feels because I was ready to completely lose my mind at the start of this podcast. And I'd like to think that we pride ourselves on our logical takes and we try to cut back on the emotional reaction as much as we can. Yeah, we enjoy wins, we hate losses, and there's always going to be some emotion in the instant reaction. That's part of the if you can say, the beauty of having a reaction podcast, is that you can hear raw takes especially like we've given tonight. But in all honesty, mate, I thought I was going to lose the plot just when we started recording. I was furious beyond belief. No, yeah. I don't know if that's coming across.
Yeah, that was captured. So obviously the Third Man Friday coming onto the podcast there. But yes, what an incredibly frustrating game. I mean, part of me is happy that the Eels managed to rally in the second half, because going into Oranges at halftime, that had the makings of 50-point shellacking in those tough Darwinian conditions. And, you know, to their credit, they did rally, but also they should not have put themselves in a position to have to rally. So tough lessons learned there. A tough cost in blood paid from this game as well, 60s. We're going to be without Reg for quite some time, looking at the fallout from here. I think there's some footage of him in the sheds in the post game, and he looks in a bad way. So you can catch that if you're watching on Fox.
There is an absolute cornucopia of things to be
Bailey
upset about.
Simonson out for a minimum of 1 week, maybe more. That was a nasty. I mean, there was nothing malicious in it, but that was a nasty head knock. And we got players struggling for form just across, you know, all three units: backline, halves, and forward pack.
And unfortunately, we have a New South Wales Cup team who have a collection themselves of players who aren't available for this week's game, and who themselves weren't really putting anyone in the NRL team under pressure with their own form.
Yep,
it has to be said.
Yep, I agree.
Now, I'm going to make a call here. If we're looking to bring a middle forward up, who do you reckon I'm going to make a suggestion about?
The Italian stallion, I think.
Luca Moretti,
Mm-hmm.
Correct. He has had the consistent form in New South Wales Cup that I'd like to see him be given a run. It's probably not the ideal circumstances when it'll be backs against the wall, but we're obviously going to be down troops. We're going to be down middle forwards with Reg being unavailable, and we probably have to apply for an exemption to get him available. Maybe because of that, we wouldn't be able to get an exemption when there's a couple of other middle forwards that are on a top 30 contract. But he'd be the bloke that I'd like to see put up, because I know what he would bring.
Some energy.
He would bring energy and aggression. Absolutely. So, mate, I don't know that is there anything more that we can drag out of this game? I'm almost feeling spent right now, to be honest.
No, unfortunately, we have to. Sorry, as my phone charger causes the notification noise there. We just have to pick up the pieces. 60s. You know, we're back to 3-5. The season is far from over. I'm not upset about that. You know, going to 4-4 would have been fantastic, because I think we would have finished inside the 8 with our at the time would have been our better for and against than most of the other teams in competition. So I'm not upset about that. We can make this up later. It's just the manner in which we're losing these games now. You know, we're quite far off our best. And to make
look, we're a long way off our best. But as I said, a night like tonight, you've got the venue, which made the job harder. You've got the match officials who made the job harder, and you've got the players themselves that made the job harder. And yet somehow it ends up 4 tries to 3. It's, you know, that's probably the part that's the most angering and annoying, is that apart from the first half, you know, I'm not that impressed with what the Broncos dished up tonight. They did what they needed to do, but there's the headlines on Fox of Broncos put competition on notice. If I'm Penrith or South, I know they beat Penrith in the first round, but I didn't see anything tonight that would threaten Penrith or South. I really didn't. I mean, let's just reflect on that. The Eels were finishing stronger than the Broncos tonight. And it should have been the Broncos down to 11 players.
Yep. Yeah. No doubts about that.
Who knows what that would have been had that like how things would have evolved if that had have been the case. Because you take out a middle forward and one of the halves, and that is a significant player loss in the game, let alone just the sheer numbers. You're talking about taking out Payne Haas from the middle. Like, how they would have survived for 10 minutes, I don't know. Maybe we would have found some incompetent way of messing up. I don't know. We will never know because it didn't happen. It should have happened, but it didn't. What can you say?
What else can you say, mate? I mean, the Eels need to be better. The referees need to be better. And the Broncos, as good as they're going, like you said, that was not a flag planting victory for them. As much as the media is going to spin it that way, they had a red hot first half with the Eels playing terrible. But then when the Eels found something close to 70% of what they're capable of, maybe less. Yeah, they wilted. So yeah, they'll be very happy to take the 2 points, no doubt. Like they're still sitting with just the one loss in the season. They're not worried about what happened today. But by the same token, this was not a morale boosting season defining victory by any means. So yeah, the season will go on. 60s next week. Parramatta Eels host the Newcastle Knights 6 p.m. on Friday. We'll be out there at Paraleagues, Jack's Bar and Grill.
Post-match
show for this one. Yep. So if you can get out there, clock off from work and race over to Combank Stadium, you can catch us in the post game. Hopefully, as the Eels rebound big time. Newcastle obviously been pretty good this year, so they'll provide a fair challenge next week. So certainly nothing close to a gimme against the Novocastrians in round 9. But yeah, for the Eels, they just got to pick themselves up, regroup, and depending on who's available from injuries and form, and knowing our luck, there'll be some dodgy suspension coming out of this game too from the MRC. They'll look at this game and say, Hopgood, 2 weeks for the least hip drop ever done.
About Payne Haas, nothing to answer.
Yeah, well, given that, my gut feeling is we're going to be vet reg for 2 months, 60s. Groin injuries for big men are nasty. So Haas will probably have, if he's unlucky, a 3-week stint on the sidelines.
Yeah, I have nothing more to say.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the Parramatta Eels falling 16-26 to the Brisbane Broncos. Their own worst enemies through most of this game, 60s, but certainly some stuff to salvage out of this in terms of knowing where they can play against the game's lead. I wouldn't say they're the best team, but they're on form at the top right now. But they've got to move on, mate, on to Newcastle, on to round 9, and then it's a magic round against the Titans where that 2-week drop-off from Darwin really hits. So it's a testing fortnight coming up for the Blue and Gold 60s, but they've got to get the job done.
Absolutely.
As always,
what can we say?
Yeah, as always, thanks for stopping by, giving us a listen. We always, I wouldn't say we have fun, mate, but maybe a bit of catharsis and getting the lancing and the wounds done in these instant reaction lost podcasts. And yeah.
Well, maybe it saved me throwing a few things around. and maybe I'm working my way back towards having a go you Eels.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end.
We move on to round 9, mate. But tomorrow, Junior Rep Grand Final qualifiers for the Harold Matthews and the SG Ball. We'll be live out there at Leichhardt. You can catch our live blog. You can catch the live stream as well. If you've got nothing else happening, make sure you watch our young men in the 17s and 19s battle for a place in the big dance. So until then, we'll catch you guys in the next episode.